My name is Naomi Washington, and before I tell you this story, I need you to understand one thing about how I operate. I do not react, I respond. And the difference between those two words is the difference between this story ending with me screaming in a parking lot and this story ending the way it actually ended, with 11 clients calling me back, one very confused competing firm, and a colleague who had to look me in the eye at a mutual client luncheon and pretend she had no idea why her book of business had just quietly collapsed. I did not say a word to her, not one, and that silence was the loudest thing I have ever done in my career. Let me take you to Charlotte, North Carolina, and let me tell you about Renee. I have been a commercial real estate broker in Charlotte for 12 years. I did not come from money. I did not come from connections. I came from a 2-bedroom apartment in Gastonia, North Carolina, with a mother who worked the overnight shift at a distribution center and a father who believed that the only thing you could truly own was your word. So I built my business on relationships, not on listings, not on market reports, not on what the square footage said on paper. On the phone calls I made when a client's deal fell through at 10 p.m. on a Friday. On remembering that Gerald, my longest client, 8 years, 4 commercial properties, liked to be called on Tuesday mornings because that was his quietest meeting day. On knowing that Patricia from the medical group had a daughter starting college and sending her a congratulations card every year because Patricia told me once that it meant something that I remembered. By the time Renee joined our firm in January of 2022, I had a book of 23 clients. Not the biggest book in the office, the most loyal. Not one of those clients had left in 5 years. That was not an accident. That was 12 years of Tuesday morning calls and Friday night follow-ups and birthday cards I addressed by hand. Renee sat 2 desks from me, and within a week she had asked me about every single one of them. Before I go further, drop your city below and tell me, have you ever trusted a coworker with context that only a colleague could have? Information about clients or customers or relationships you'd spent years building and watched them use it against you? Because what Renee did is only possible when you've been given access, and I gave her access because I thought that's what good colleagues did. Drop it below. I want to know who else has been here. It started, as these things always do, with something I couldn't quite put my finger on. March 2022, 2 months after Renee joined, one of my mid-tier clients, a property developer named Curtis, mentioned in passing that he'd had a great conversation with one of my colleagues. He said she had reached out to follow up on some market data I had sent him. I had not asked anyone to follow up on my behalf, but Curtis seemed pleased. I noted it and moved on. June 2022. A client named Sandra mentioned that she had been introduced, her word, to someone at my firm who was doing exciting work. Sandra was not the type to seek out new brokers. Sandra had used the same broker, then me, for 11 years. I thought nothing of it. People network. September 2022. My manager, in a quarterly review, mentioned that my client contact frequency metrics were slightly down. He showed me a dashboard. My calls were the same as always. My emails were the same. What had changed was the response rate. 3 clients who usually replied within hours were now taking days. I did not connect these data points until March of 2023, and I only connected them because Gerald called me. Gerald, 8 years, the man who approved my first major commercial lease and told me afterward that I was the first broker who had ever called him back on the same day. Gerald called me on a Wednesday afternoon and said he needed to tell me something. He said it like a man who was about to apologize. He said a colleague of mine had been in contact with him, that she had mentioned carefully, kindly, that I had been considering a career transition, that I was looking at options outside of brokerage, that he might want to establish a relationship with someone who was planning to be around long term. I had said no such thing to anyone. I thanked Gerald. I told him that information was incorrect. I told him I would call him on Tuesday morning the way I always did. And then I sat at my desk for a long time, and I looked at Renee's desk 2 rows over, and I did not say a single word. I spent the next 2 weeks doing what I do with property valuations. I gathered data before I made a move. I called every client on my list, not about business, just to check in, the way I always did. And in those calls with clients who trusted me enough to be honest, I learned what had been happening for 12 months. Renee had been working through my client list systematically. She had reached out to 11 of my 23 clients. To each one, she had said some version of the same thing, that she was building her practice, that she had heard great things about them from me, and that she wanted to make sure they had a secondary relationship at the firm in case I ever transitioned. In case. That word. She had planted a seed of doubt so carefully tended that 3 of them had already been considering making her their primary broker. And she had used my name every single time. My reputation, my relationships, my 12 years. She had used all of it as the door and walked herself right through it. I wrote down all 11 names. I put the paper in my desk drawer. I went home. I made dinner, and I thought about what my father used to say about the only thing you could truly own: your word. He said, your word. Renee had borrowed mine without asking, and I was going to need her to return it. In the bottom right drawer of my desk at the office, I keep a physical card file. Index cards. I know, in 2022, index cards. But my father kept one too, for every customer he had ever dealt with in 30 years of running a small appliance repair shop in Gastonia. He said a digital list was something you could search, a card file was something you could feel. Every client I have ever had is in that file. Their name, their property history, their preferred contact day, one personal detail I noted from our first meeting. Gerald's card says, calls Tuesday, thanked me same day, daughter plays piano. Patricia's says, medical group, detail-oriented, sends Christmas cards. Daughter Emma, college 2023. When Renee joined the firm and asked me about my clients in those first weeks, she asked about them the way you ask about people you're going to look up later. I answered because I thought that was collegial, because I thought we were building something shared. But she had never touched the card file. She didn't know it existed. And the things on those cards, the Tuesday call, the daughter's name, the same day callback, those things were mine. Those things were what a relationship actually was. She had the names, I had the knowledge. And a name without the knowledge is just a phone number. I did not confront Renee. I did not go to my manager. I did not send an email that could be forwarded or screenshotted or used to paint me as difficult. I am a Black woman in commercial real estate, and I have spent 12 years understanding exactly which battles to fight loudly and which to win quietly. This was a quiet battle. Here is what I did. I called every one of my 23 clients, not the 11, all 23. I told each of them the same thing, that I wanted to schedule our next quarterly check-in, that I had some market data I thought would be valuable for them specifically, and that I was planning to be at this firm for a long time and wanted to make sure our relationship was strong going into the back half of the year. I said it warmly. I said it sincerely, because I meant every word. For the 11 whose trust had been partially redirected, those calls did something specific. They heard my voice. They heard me ask about their business. Gerald heard me ask about his daughter's piano recital, something Renee could not have known to ask about. Patricia heard me ask about Emma's first semester. And in hearing those things, they were reminded, not told, reminded what a relationship with me actually felt like, versus what a relationship with someone who had used my name to introduce herself felt like. Then I did one more thing. I called the 3 clients who had been most actively considering switching to Renee as their primary broker. I asked each of them, directly and professionally, whether there was anything about my service they felt had been lacking. 2 of them said no, they had just been introduced to someone new and hadn't thought deeply about it. The third, a developer named Marcus, paused for a moment and then said, "Naomi, to be honest, I got the impression you might be moving on. Was that wrong?" And I said, "Marcus, that was incorrect information. I have no plans to leave, and whoever told you that did not hear it from me." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I see. Well, let's set up that check-in." I hung up the phone. I opened my card file. I pulled Renee's card. I had made one out of professional habit when she joined. I wrote one word on it. Then I put it back in the file. The word was noted. In June of 2023, Renee announced she was leaving the firm for a competitor, a larger shop, a bigger platform. She framed it as an opportunity she couldn't pass up. She gave 2 weeks' notice and spent those 2 weeks having very visible, very warm goodbye conversations with the clients she had cultivated. What she did not know was that I had already had those conversations first. The week after she left, I began to hear back from the clients she had expected to follow her. Curtis called to confirm our next quarterly meeting. Sandra sent me a referral, the first unsolicited referral she had sent me in 2 years. Gerald, on a Tuesday morning, called me before I could call him and said, "Naomi, I just want you to know I am not going anywhere." He said it the way a man says something he has been meaning to say for a while. 3 clients did follow Renee to the new firm. I had expected that. They were clients she had relationships with that predated my connection to them, clients she had brought to our firm from a previous job. They were hers to take, and I did not begrudge them. But of the 11 she had worked to redirect, 8 came back to me, and the 3 who had been on the fence, Marcus and 2 others, called me within 30 days of her departure to confirm that I was their primary broker and they were not making any changes. 11 clients cultivated in 12 months. 8 returned within 30 days of her leaving. The math was its own verdict. Renee found out that the transition had not gone the way she planned. I know this because the commercial real estate world in Charlotte is not large. People talk. And what got back to me was that Renee had told colleagues at her new firm that I had gone out of my way to undermine her client relationships before she left, that I had been aggressive in reestablishing contact with clients who had chosen to work with Renee. I want you to hear that framing clearly. In Renee's version of events, I was the aggressor for calling my own clients. The new firm reached out to 2 of the returning clients to confirm the transition. Both of those clients told the firm, in their own words, that they had chosen to remain with me because of a long-standing relationship and that they had not been solicited or pressured. One of them, Marcus, said specifically that he had become aware that information shared with him about my status at my previous firm had been inaccurate and that this had factored into his decision. The new firm did not pursue the matter further because there was nothing to pursue. I sent Renee one message, professional, cordial, brief. It said, "Wishing you the best in your new role." I meant it. Not with warmth, with accuracy. I wished her her best, because her best, as it turned out, was not going to be enough. I told you at the beginning that I made one phone call, and I have been holding that detail until now, because the phone call only makes sense once you understand everything that came before it. In September of 2023, 3 months after Renee left, I was invited to present at a commercial real estate networking event in Charlotte, one of those quarterly dinners where brokers and developers and property managers all sit in the same room and pretend they're not evaluating each other constantly. Renee was at the event with 3 of her new firm's brokers. We made eye contact once across the room. She looked away first. At that dinner, I was seated next to a developer named Howard who had been on the periphery of my network for years, never a client, always a potential one. He was in the process of selecting a broker for a significant mixed-use development project in South Charlotte, a meaningful piece of business. We talked for 2 hours. I did what I always do. I asked about the project, I asked about his timeline, I asked what he had found frustrating about previous broker relationships. He said the thing most developers say, "I just want someone who calls me back." I said, "Howard, I will call you back the same day, every time. That is not a pitch, that is just how I work." He became a client 2 weeks later. That was the phone call. Not a confrontation, not a complaint. A relationship, built the way I always build them, one Tuesday morning at a time. And that is the only call I needed to make. First wave. Renee's book at the new firm. She had expected to arrive with 11 clients from my roster plus her own 3. She arrived with 3. The new firm had given her a compensation structure that assumed a larger book. When the book did not materialize at the size projected, her structure was renegotiated. She made significantly less in her first year than she had been paid at our firm. Second wave, the referral network. Commercial real estate in Charlotte runs on referrals. Developers talk to each other. Property managers talk to each other. When 3 of the returning clients told their network what had happened, and they did because people always do, Renee's name began to carry a question mark. Not a scandal, a question mark. In this business, that is enough. Third wave, Marcus, the developer who had almost switched. He sent me 2 referrals in the 6 months after Renee left, not because I asked, because he felt, I think, that he owed me some loyalty for the loyalty I had extended to him. One of those referrals became a client who has since done 3 transactions with me. Fourth wave, Howard, the new client from the networking dinner. His mixed-use development in South Charlotte closed in April of 2024. It was the largest single transaction of my career. It was a result of a dinner conversation I would never have had if I had spent the previous year managing drama instead of managing my client relationships. Fifth wave, the quarterly award for new client acquisition. The award Renee had won the year she was at our firm. I won it in Q1 of 2024. My manager presented it to me in a team meeting and said, "Naomi has had the strongest client retention and new acquisition numbers of anyone in this office this quarter." He did not know the full story. He did not need to. The numbers told it for me. The numbers always tell it. My book of business today has 31 clients, 8 more than when Renee joined. Gerald is still a Tuesday morning call. Patricia's daughter, Emma, made the dean's list her sophomore year and I sent a card. Marcus referred his business partner to me last spring. I still have the card file. I added Howard's card in June of 2023. It says, "Mixed use, South Charlotte." Called me back the same day. He said that's all he wanted. It was. I still have Renee's card. It still has one word on it. Noted. I don't think about Renee much. She is doing whatever she is doing, and I genuinely wish her competence. I think she is talented. I think she made a calculation that my relationships could be borrowed without my knowledge, and she would be gone before I understood what had happened. She was wrong about the timeline. I understood it faster than she expected, and I responded slower than she expected. That slowness is the whole thing. That is the entire strategy. Not silence out of fear, silence out of discipline. Silence that sounds like nothing and works like everything. My father is 71 years old, and he still has his card file from the appliance repair shop. He closed the shop in 2018, but he kept the file. He says he looks at it sometimes. He says it reminds him that every person he ever dealt with gave him something, a repair, a relationship, a lesson, that none of it was wasted. I understand that now in a way I didn't before Renee. She thought she was taking something from me. She was giving me the clearest picture I have ever had of what I was actually building. Here is where I land. People have asked me, colleagues, friends, people who heard parts of this story, why I didn't report Renee, why I didn't make noise, why I stayed quiet. And my answer is always the same, because noise would have made me the story, and I am not the story. The work is the story. The relationships are the story. The Tuesday morning calls and the same-day callbacks and the birthday cards and the card file in the bottom right drawer, that is the story. That is what I built. And the only way to prove what you built is to show what it does when someone tries to take it apart. It held. All of it held. Not because I fought for it, because I had built it right. Relationships remember. That's all I ever needed them to do. If you made it to the end of this, thank you. Drop a comment. Tell me what in this story hit you the hardest. I read every single one. Subscribe to Karma Delivered. Every story on this channel is true in the ways that matter. And Karma, she doesn't need you to say a word. She just needs you to do the work. Stay solid.